Hello, everyone. Welcome in to another episode of the Payne and Drain Show, following yet another Lions win, another Lions divisional win, and certainly one that has come with a fair bit of chatter from both sides after the game. I'm your host, Zach Payne. With me, as always, is my co host, Alex Drain. And Alex, how are we feeling after the Lions complete the sweep on the Packers?
It's been a few days since it happened. Another Thursday game there, so we've gotten some time to simmer with it, and it still feels pretty good. This was a game that we had talked about going in was going to be quite difficult, could potentially be the best win of the Dan Campbell era if they pulled it off. I think that still stands true. I don't know what the official ranking of best Campbell era wins would be, but this one's got to be pretty high up there. It's a national TV game, everybody watching, shorthanded defense without Dan Skipper or with Dan Skipper without Taylor Decker on offense. And then to add on to it, they play 3/4 of the game without Ali McNeil, which if you had told us before the game probably would have felt like the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of their chances of winning, but they pulled it off. And I will never, ever take any wins against the Packers for granted. I will always savor them. Doesn't matter if it's those couple times that we beat them when they were resting all their starters for the playoffs. Doesn't matter. Every Packers win is satisfying, and this one, given the reaction after the game, was particularly satisfying.
Yeah, and we are going to have an extensive discussion on the defense, primarily the front seven. But as always, we like to kick things off on the offensive side of the ball. And this was probably one of the weirder games in which they scored 31 or 34 points. The Lions offense throughout this game, they were hardly efficient at moving the ball. They moved the ball effectively, but they really struggled to generate explosive plays throughout this game. The Tim Patrick ended up having a huge game, including a couple of touchdowns. But the run game, I think both backs were under 4 yards a carry in this one. JMO ends up being your leading receiver. He has a couple of nice plays, but just not the explosive offense we're used to seeing. I don't know if that was necessarily something that the Packers were doing exceptionally well, or if the Lions were just trying to work on taking up more of the clock, considering how shorthanded they were on defense. Now, with that being said, obviously a key part of this is the offensive line. And outside of Dan Skipper, who actually played quite well, this wasn't really the type of game where the offensive line takes over the way you would hope it would.
Yeah, I didn't think this was a great offensive line game that held up on rewatch. They definitely had their moments. The Lions were running a lot of outside zone. They were running a decent amount of duo. Didn't really do a lot of gap stuff. Run blocking was fine in general. It did feel like they needed those explosive plays, particularly vertical passing, to open up the box a little bit. Packers definitely were keying in a fair amount. On the other hand, I think probably the reason they didn't was fear over pass protection, particularly from Skipper's side. That's my guess, because they really didn't do much vertically, and they really didn't do much to the sidelines. They feasted over the middle. Everything was over the middle, whether it's tight ends, whether it was a guy running on a crossing route. They had Amon-Ra feast over the middle, but they threw very little to the sidelines, very little deep, and it did allow, and they also threw a ton of screens. So everything was kind of down around the line of scrimmage area or over the middle, and so it did create this situation where the Packers were loaded up in that area. It bogged down their run game at points, but to the point about the offensive line, there were plays in this game that Ben Johnson had, and they just weren't executed. And I saw two or three plays in particular, the biggest one being that third down run that gets stopped, and the Lions ended up having to punt. I think it's 3rd and 5. I don't remember which drive that. It's the late first quarter. They run the ball with Gibbs for no gain, Gibbs for 5 yards. Then 3rd and 5, they get TFL'd, and the whole crowd's like, you can't run the ball 3 straight times. And you watch that play, they have it. They absolutely have it. It's a great play call from Ben Johnson. All you gotta do is have Frank Ragnow hit his block, and you've delivered Jahmyr Gibbs not just 5 yards, but it's him versus the safety to see if it's a 75-yard touchdown. And Ragnow gets whipped, and the DT comes right there and stuffs him. And there were a few plays in this game where everything was set up except Frank Ragnow, and he just didn't do it. And it's jarring to see that kind of game from an all-pro caliber center. But he had a rough one, and it did deny them some potentially at least chunk plays, but possibly explosive plays.
Yeah, and this was Kenny Clark had a great game on the other side. That should be acknowledged. Kenny Clark, one of the better nose tackles in the league for the last number of years. It's always a great matchup when him and Ragnar go against each other twice a year. Sometimes he's going to win that matchup, and sometimes Ragnar's going to get got. He got a lot in this game. I think what's the other guy they have over there? Devontae Wyatt. He also had
Yep.
a few nice moments in this game. The Packers defensive line, they did a good job, and particularly in the run game, they did a good job of funneling to their linebackers and having their linebackers flow downhill to prevent. So even when the Lions running backs, one of the reasons Detroit has had so much success on the ground is their ability to generate yards before contact, and they routinely Gibbs and Montgomery can get two or 3 yards downfield before they get touched. That wasn't the case in this game. The Packers really did a good job of flowing to the ball. Their linebackers played really well. And obviously, when your run game isn't going at quite a dominant level as you're used to, that's going to affect the passing game. Now, Jared Goff, the interception was bad. That was just the Packers. They did a great job. Like, he thought Nixon was gonna flow to the flat. He thought like he was gonna be in a flat zone, and he baited him perfectly. It was a great bait by Nixon. Goff threw it thinking that Amon-Ra was gonna be open. Aside from that interception, which obviously comes at a bad moment, bad start to the half, and we were all clamoring that or yelling that the third quarter was back. He did all right. He had a pretty decent game. Again, not his best, but considering that the over the top stuff, the explosive plays to JMO were taken away, and considering that Amon-Ra was just not the Packers did a pretty good job taking him away. Like, it wasn't a very good Amon-Ra day. It was a good day for Goff to throw the ball to a variety of targets, including Tim Patrick and Sam Laporta in this one. What did you think of Goff's performance?
He was the guy I think probably I came away the most positive on relative to the baseline after doing the rewatch because I think when I watched it the first time I was like, yeah, Goff was pretty good. Then I went back and went through the tape again and I came away saying, no, he was really good in this game. And yes, he has the bad interception, and it was bad. It hands the Packers 3 points. They turn it into 7. Not good. But outside of that, it was a really excellent game. On my charting, I had him down for 28 positive events, 3 negative events, 14, between screens and pressure affected throws, etc. that are kind of neutral. But it was a strongly positive game from him. I thought he navigated the pocket really well. He had a throw in particular where there's like pressure coming up off the side on a third down. He steps up, finds Montgomery leaking out to pick up the first down. That one was really nice. He threw some just absolute lasers in there. One to JMO on the first drive. The throw he makes to Laporta, that Laporta makes a diving catch on later in the game. Great catch from Laporta, no question, but that ball's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
The perfect spot where only Laporta has a shot at it, and the tight end brings it in. That was a great one. It just was a really, really strong and impressive performance because pass pro wasn't great. Like, it wasn't awful in the sense that, Gary wasn't tearing around the corner and thunder sacking Goff over and over again. But there was pressure. There were disturbing things coming in Goff's face. He has to sidestep. He has to step up. And he really wasn't fazed by it at all. So I was really impressed with his performance. He did get some help from the screen game, etc. That pads the numbers. But the downfield stuff was really good. And I thought he had another scramble event. They ran a bootleg that he goes and picks up some solid yards. Although, what I had to say about this is he could have gotten the first down and he just chose
Hmm.
not to. I watched it on replay. He's got 12 yards. Got 12 yards. There's no one coming to hit him. Trust your blockers. Pick up the first down, then go out of bounds. He runs out 2 yards short. That was kind of annoying, but otherwise, a really strong game, and you needed a really strong game. You need your best players to step up with a shorthanded roster, and he did in this game.
Yeah, and on Laporta, that diving catch made up for the one that
Yeah.
hit him square in the chest that he dropped. Which watching live, the drop, I remember watching it, was like, oh, nice catch, nice play, and then whatever, go back to, oh, he dropped it. And the replay is just hilarious of that drop because it just goes straight through and squeaks out under the arm. Um, in general, Laporta had a fine game. He had a really nice screen concept to Laporta
Yep.
in the red zone that gets you inside the 5. That might have been the end of the half that happened. And as you said, Ben Johnson had a solid game. It just comes down to execution, which is often the case. The players still have to go out and make plays. Now, speaking of Ben Johnson, I had a comment last show regarding Ben Johnson's usage of Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game and how we had been promised all of these unique concepts and utilizing Gibbs' skill set, and we hadn't seen it. We just like plainly had not seen it up to this point. And this week, to Ben Johnson's credit, this week he got Jahmyr Gibbs on an angle route in a crucial 4th down at the end of the half, and it works perfectly. The angle route remains undefeated, and I was very happy to see that Gibbs was being used in that way.
Yeah, they went to it in the biggest situation of this game, 4th and goal. They obviously they go 4th and goal a second time as well in the
A lot
third
of 4th
quarter,
downs.
sorry for, but the one that comes later didn't feel as important as that one right at the end of the half. You needed that boost going into halftime, and they went right to it, and it worked. That was great stuff. And again, a great throw from Goff as well. Like Gibbs obviously is going to win that matchup with a linebacker, but it's in a goal line situation. You don't have that large of a window to throw it, and he just zips it in there for the touchdown. So that was good stuff. Interestingly, I thought on the Gibbs topic, I thought him and Montgomery had overall a fairly unremarkable game. Like there's one Montgomery run on the first drive I thought was really good. Gibbs had some moments. I also thought they had like each guy had one or two runs where I kind of confused what they saw and why they ran where they ran. Some of their screen stuff, again, there was like just strange routes that I thought they were taking after they had the ball in their hands. So not necessarily their best game, but on the flip side, I thought that this was a really nice game from all the wide receivers in general. Amon-Ra dominates that first drive, then we don't see him much after that, but he comes back in the biggest situation right at the end of the game with a huge catch there to set them up in short yardage that they then get the first down, kick the field goal, game over. Tim Patrick, 2 touchdowns. Really nice game from him. Had some other catches as well, including a nice chunk over the middle. And then JMO has a toe tap on the field goal drive to win it. That was a really nice play. So those guys really stepped up as well, and they made up for the fact that the running backs were just kind of there in this game.
As soon as that JMO toe tap happened, the first thing I did was message you that was a character development moment for JMO because you and I all season have been talking about how JMO has got to have better, just awareness of where he is on the field and awareness, like situational awareness to get the feet inbounds. And he did it. He actually learned. He's learning. So, very good to see that. Obviously, he had a couple of nice plays in this game. As for the running backs, I will say Gibbs had one really nice run where it looked like it was going to be a 4-yard loss because like 2 Packers defenders were just in the backfield as the snap happened, it felt like. And Gibbs managed to turn it into like a 20-yard gain down to the 10-yard line. That's kind of the lightning in the bottle aspect you get from Gibbs is sometimes he can just outrun people and kind of squeeze through holes that Montgomery just doesn't have the agility to do, even though Montgomery is fairly agile in his own right. But yeah, not a dominant running game. The receivers, as you mentioned, all very solid. I was most impressed though with just the continued steadiness of Tim Patrick. As I mentioned earlier, two crucial touchdowns, one coming on a fourth down. His first touchdown since 2021, I believe. Um, so it's got to be mentioned. Like shout out Tim Patrick. Has had a incredibly difficult journey with multiple season-ending injuries. I believe both were Achilles injuries. So to see him, continue to get rewarded for the hard work he's put in over the past few years, just to be able to stay in the NFL, and not only that, but succeed in Detroit as he has done. Very good to see.
Yeah, obviously hard not to cheer for the guy. Had a great game in this one. I do also want to shout out on the topic of the receivers that like jet sweep they ran with Amon-Ra. That was awesome. That was Ben Johnson's best play call. Really good design there. Had to flag that one. Picked up an easy chunk for these guys. And, overall, you look at this offense, and like you mentioned at the top, they don't have a lot of explosive plays. That said, they run 76 plays in this game. Packers only run 45 plays, time of possession very lopsided in Detroit's favor, which was good coaching. It's how they had to get to the finish line here. But across 76 plays, they gained 391 yards. So 5.1 yards per play. That's a really good, consistent clip. A lot of their drives, they end up going pretty far with. They have a couple punts early in the game, but after that, they are scoring on every drive except for the turnover. I mean, you go touchdown, punt, field goal, touchdown, INT, touchdown, turnover on downs, touchdown, field goal. Everything was aggressive. They kept pressing their luck. They went for it on fourth down a lot. They rose up in the biggest moments, and they gained, again, 5.1 yards per play on a ton of plays in this game. And they scored enough to win. So,
Yeah.
really nothing that you can say negative about this group. And I thought they rose to the occasion when it mattered. They did enough. And that's the big story.
And it just is funny that putting up 34 points against your most hated rival is doing enough. Like, obviously, context is everything, but just it's important to remember how spoiled we are with this offense. That scoring 34 points is considered just doing enough to win.
Yeah, against a team that went all out in the offseason to fix their defense. I mean, they went out and they hired Jeff Hafley, who was a head coach in college football. Like, I don't know exactly what they paid Hafley, but it had to be a lot to get him to quit being a head coach at the FBS level. And again, the Lions still able to gain 34 points in this game to win it. My final note on the offense that should be mentioned, we have another Quay Walker incident in this game. He continues to pop up in this rivalry. 2 years ago in the game in Lambeau, he pushes a trainer, a Lions trainer, and gets a 15-yard penalty that was fairly important. The game last year in Lambeau, Lions are kicking a field goal in a kind of big spot, and he tries to jump over and hits the center, gives the Lions a first down. They punch it in the end zone. In this one, not as consequential, but still funny. He gets jawing with Dan Skipper, gets the hands up high, and Skipper draws a charge in terrific fashion there. And the Lions social media account even posted its celebration of it. Obviously a flop. Quay Walker is a decent-sized boy, but Dan Skipper is a mammoth. When he goes down by a guy he's got 100 pounds on, it's probably a flop. It was. But hey, shout out Dan Skipper, got us 15 yards. All you got to do is bait this guy, because it appears that his brain is made of pudding. And if you can you can bait him into something dumb, go ahead.
Yeah, like going back to the first incident a couple of years ago, that I remember Matt LaFleur yelling from the sidelines, just like, be effing smart, like, because Walker, he got ejected, but they didn't know that at the time. And then the one in Lambeau last year was so funny because that was when the Packers actually, the Lions killed them in the first half. It was like 27-0 or something. And then the Packers, start to make it interesting, start a weird comeback. They get, a very lucky play at the end of the third quarter when the third quarter actually had expired and the refs didn't call it. And they start to make that game interesting. If the Lions had kicked a field goal there, it's still a two-score game. But Quay Walker does a dumb thing. Montgomery punches in his third touchdown, and alas, all is well in the world again. And this one, as you mentioned, just hilarious. Absolutely perfect acting from Skipper. Does a great job finishing the play and like playing hard through the whistle to bait that contact. It was just perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah, and I do want to say on the note of Skipper, like I didn't think he was incredible in this game, but he's stepped up for the team. He's now had to fill in for Decker a few times. He's kind of now the. I saw someone online saying he's the new Andre Fluellen of this team as a old throwback to a sort of depth tackle that just was always around when needed to fill in, and that's kind of what Skipper's become, like an almost an honorary starter in the sense that he's the first man up when you need some help at tackle, and with the way Decker's health is, you need that help at least once or twice a year, and he does it. He fills in, and credit to him.
Will say he only gave up one pressure.
Yeah.
That's a really solid game. If any of you listening watch the Lions locker room like videos that they put out, Dan Campbell made a point to shout out Skipper because it looked like he was throwing up in the corner. He was like, "Way to go, Skip! Keep throwing up, whatever you're doing." It was a funny moment. So yeah, credit to Dan Skipper.
I'll always love that one. I think was it last year, the one where the locker room video where Dan Campbell's just like, "Hey Skip, nice freaking job."
Yeah, they're amazing, and it's always fun to watch Dan Campbell's energy in the locker room. So really glad that the Lions do that. Hope, and I like, the more important the win, the more excited he gets, which is always is fun to see as well. All right. Now flipping over to the defense, this is where this game was going to be basically won or lost, is because the Lions had a plethora of guys out of the lineup due to injury. And as we mentioned earlier, Aleem McNeil leaves the game for 3 quarters due to a concussion, I believe, that hopefully he's okay by Sunday. You need him back. No DJ Reader, no Josh Pascal, no Levi Onwuzurike. It was basically Zadarius Smith and his merry band of men. Now, there were a number of backup guys that stepped up in major ways, and we will run through all of those names, as I'm sure. But in a vacuum, how did you feel about the front seven relative to expectations coming into this game?
But it was fine overall. The first Packers touchdown drive was a pretty bad drive for the run defense. They kind of just got smashed in. But overall, Jacobs runs for, not just Jacobs, the whole Packers team runs for 4.1 yards per carry, which is fine. The only place it was really disappointing was the red zone, where Jacobs has 3 rushing touchdowns, and they kind of get just paved in those situations, where instead you'd like them to step up in those moments, particularly that Jacobs touchdown after the Goff interception, where he breaks like 2-3 tackles, and it just didn't even look hard. It kind of folded on that drive. That was disappointing to see, but the run defense was fine. Pressure was okay. I mean, they blitzed a lot. They didn't get like a ton of organic rush, but they got a little bit. Zadarius Smith, big impact early in this game, then less noticeable later. I thought Muhammad had another pretty solid game, had some moments. Pat O'Connor had a couple pass rush moments. PFF didn't like his run defense at all. I wasn't looking that closely at that, but if you can just get a couple good pass rushes from a third string defensive tackle against a team like the Packers, I think you take that. So I think they did enough overall. It wasn't masterful, but it was fine.
Yeah, like I will say, Pat O'Connor specifically had a few really nice moments. He had some a pretty good first step off the line in pass rush, where he was able to just get pressure almost instantly and force Love off of his spot. obviously didn't get him on the ground, but just forcing a QB to move and be aware of the pass rush is always important as well. Zedarius, he gets the sack on the first play on defense. He was okay the rest of the game. It's tough when he's the only name on the defensive line that
Yeah.
you have to worry about. It's very easy to key in on him. Like you could have had Hutchinson out there, and it would have been the same result, right? Because there's so little to worry about aside from that you can just key in. There was one linebacker, I believe, who had a really nice open field tackle on Love, where he basically just drags him down by the arm on that final Packers drive.
Yeah, that was Ezekiel Turner.
Yes, Turner. Turner had a few nice moments. I think he got blown off the ball a few times in run defense, but as far as defending the pass, they did okay. And look, for as good as Jacobs did, the Packers were never going to win this game just by running the football. They were going to have to rely on Jordan Love and his arm. They put up 31. They have a few big plays. They had a really nice play to Christian Watson to start the second half, which was, kind of inevitable at some point that they were going to test the Lions downfield. The Lions they have solid corners. Like Carlton Davis and Terran Arnold are good corners, but they're not fast. They're and a burner like Christian Watson is going to get over the top every now and again. Carlton Davis did get, I don't want to say picked on, but he did get targeted a lot in this game, it felt like.
Yeah, which is interesting because usually you expect it to be more towards Arnold. Um, the Davis had a couple moments where he was so close. Like the really the bad moment was the Watson bomb over the top. Not good. Gets torched from really much the hop, and Kirby doesn't give him any help. And I looked at the replay. I don't think there's anything Kirby could have done. The Packers have Watson singled to the top. They got trips to the bottom. Obviously, as a deep safety in that situation, you're going to be shaded more to the side with the more receivers to start. Maybe he's a little late to recognize Davis is in trouble, but he's coming a long way over. Wasn't going to matter. So Davis gets toasted there, not good. But otherwise, the two other kind of big plays he gives up, he's like a millimeter from breaking up those passes. There's one against a Watson again on the play, which was a rehash of a play last year against the Cowboys, less severe than this one, but it was the same thing where you get Glenn schemes up a perfect blitz, you get a linebacker free rush at the quarterback for what should be minus 8-yard sack. Last year against the Cowboys, that was going to be a safety if Derek Barnes stick stack Prescott and he misses him. And it's the same story. Quarterback sidesteps the out-of-control linebacker, steps up, delivers a dagger against pretty good coverage, and the CeeDee Lamb one last year turned into a 97-yard touchdown. This one only turns into about a 30-yard chunk. But you look at that play, that's a massive swing in this game. Because if Campbell hits Love on that play, they were already backed up. I think it was 2nd and 14. If he sacks Love there and he has a free rush at him, 3rd and 22 or something like that, you probably get off the field. Instead, Love steps up and he fires a laser, and Davis is so close. His hand is there.
I think he got a hand on it.
Yeah, it might even have grazed his fingertips, and yet Watson makes the catch, runs forward a little bit, then goes out of bounds for a 29-yard gain. Altogether, that's a 36-yard swing, something like that, between those two plays. So that's really frustrating. And then the touchdown he gives up to Tucker Kraft, same story. Tiny window, quarterback hits it. You just gotta tip your cap. And so I don't fault Davis too much for that. Sometimes the other team makes really good skill plays, and it is what it is. And the truth is, if we are somewhat absolving him for those two plays, we're heavily giving him negatives for the Watson bomb. We also have to give him a heavy positive for a punch-out on Watson that leads to David Long Jr. fumble recovery. So in all, it was an eventful day from Carlton Davis, but not necessarily like an awful day, despite what the total numbers are going to come out to be.
Yeah, I guess that is important to note because when we talk about defensive backs, we typically err on the side of, well, if we don't talk about you, that means you were inactive, which is a good thing. You weren't targeted, nothing happened. In this game, there was like a lot going to Carlton Davis, and it is important to recognize the positive plays that offset the negatives because you're going to give up a play every now and again. You're never always going to be on the right side of a call or a play, which brings us to Terrion Arnold, who picks up another defensive pass interference penalty in a crucial moment too. I don't know what this kid needs to hear. Just turn your head around. Like, he's there. He's in good position. Watson has no chance of making a play on the ball because Arnold has good coverage. And just like lay off a little bit, turn your head, and you could get the interception yourself. Like, obviously, after committing the foul, he tips it up and it's picked off. But man, Arnold is so close to being something so amazing. He just needs to figure this one thing out.
Yeah, and naturally, the ball tipped up in the air was, of course, intercepted by Carlton Davis. Everything was happening for him in this game. That one's just so frustrating because this isn't a pass interference that you need to take. You're not cooked and having to just grab or tackle. He's right there. He's in position. He starts kind of grabbing before the ball is like even close to there, and he has plenty of time to turn around. As you mentioned, it wasn't a great throw. He could have intercepted it. It's almost like we need to get in like a shot collar or something that will remind him to turn the head around when the time comes, because it's just an unnecessary flag. It really serves no purpose. I don't really know why his instinct is to stay with the back to the ball and just kind of grab something. Probably he must have learned at Alabama, but that was a really frustrating play, especially because it was a third down. They were getting ready to potentially force a field goal. Coverage was good across the board, so yeah, no, that one is frustrating. But outside of that, we really didn't see him a lot in this game. He makes a tackle on a drag route, I think, on Watson. The ball's a little thrown behind. I think even if it's thrown in stride, he probably still makes the play, and that got the Lions off the field. So good job on that. I didn't see much from Mick Robertson either in this game. So it was really just the couple Arnold events, and then everything else was going on to Carlton Davis, and that was kind of the story of the DBs in this game.
Yeah, and look, Robertson and Arnold kind of shared duties on Jaden Reed in this game.
Yep.
Jaden Reed, 0 catches.
Yep.
So anytime you can hold your opponent's best receiver to nothing, that's a good day. And that credit to the DBs for that.
Yeah, Reed did draw a defensive holding on the first series of the game on a third down, gave him a fresh set of downs. So that kind of counts. But yeah, no catches, especially he was on the St. Brown Brothers podcast like a month ago, and he was talking trash about what he was going to do in Detroit. So
I don't know if
can
you
just laugh
saw.
about that one.
JMO was also jawing at him on Instagram after the game. Like Jaden Reed was like, "Oh yeah, look at your career stats," and JMO's like, "You're only as good as your last game."
So yeah, that was nice, especially because Jaden Reed last time around when we were in Green Bay was really the only receiver that was doing anything for the Packers. So kind of tale of two games there. Also in the past game, I want to point out that the reserve linebackers a little dicey for me on rewatch. There's one play where they hit a tight end going over the middle, and for some reason, the linebacker, I think that one was Quan Alexander, starts running at the running back in the flat, even though Campbell's clearly closer to the guy, and the tight end runs right by him for like a chunk gain. No one covers him. That was like, don't really know what that was. They also get the linebackers to bite really hard on a play action hit over the middle to a tight end. So, that stuff probably just naturally going to happen with these are the guys you're playing, but something to get on
Well,
record.
and with that, we talked about the fact that the Lions have been able to get actual names from practice
Yeah.
squads around the league. Quan Alexander, David Long, Jamal Adams. None of them are known for their pass coverage. All of them are primarily run defenders, right? So should be noted that you're probably going to have more of these gaffes with guys that are more geared towards stopping the run.
Yeah, and Jamal Adams, who they've now beefed up into a thick boy Jamal Adams trying to play linebacker instead of safety. He gets put in the spin cycle by Dontavian Wicks. On watching that replay, I'm just like 0% chance he's covering that route. 0.0%. So again, that's just the nature of personnel. But by the time you get to the end of this game, Branch is cramping. I didn't think it was a good Branch game in general. Just putting that out there. But he starts cramping up. And so by the end of the game, with him slowed down and McNeil out of the game, you're down to basically your corners and Kirby are the only real pieces. Campbell, I guess, left to the defense. This was a really second team heavy unit. We knew that going in. And in all, when you look at the results, they did enough. They 298 yards against on 45 plays. That's a really high yards per play clip. But it's the Packers, and they are a never bunt hit dingers offense. It swings on explosive plays. You have a 59-yard Watson catch. Outside of that, 5.4 yards per play, which I think on a just a regular basis is fine. And Campbell makes that sack instead of a 30-yard gain. You're down under 5 yards per play. Like, there were just a couple moments that happens against this team, but down to down, they weren't shredded. They did enough. Credit to them.
And the other factor of that is because you are relying on reserves, that means less opportunities for Agent of Chaos, Jordan Love, to take over. And he was able to, play a he was able to play a clean game. He did his job well. It just came down to who had the ball last, and the Lions ended up with the ball last. And we'll talk about the aggressive nature of what they did with the ball on offense in a little bit. Before we get to that, actually no, we can get to game theory. We can talk about that first.
So game theory, they have 5 instances of fourth downs they go for, all very short yardage. 4th and 2, or 4th and goal from the 2, 4th and 1 from midfield, 4th and goal from the 3, 4th and 1 from the 31, and 4th and a half yard from the 21. So there were no 4th and 5s, 4th and 6s. It was all very, very short yardage. To me, the only one that's really disputable is the one they don't get, which merits some discussion. The other ones, I think we're probably in agreement on those. I think you can make a case on that one at the end of the second quarter, simply because, as we know, the biggest, the reason that models like you to go for the goal line fourth downs is the field position conveyed by not getting it, right? That if you don't get it, the other team's backed way up, and that gives you some free downs, the high probability of getting a stop, then getting favorable field position off a punt, etc., etc. That's why you go for them. When it's at the end of a second quarter, you're not going to get that field position. It's going to go into halftime, and it will just reset. So I can see the argument for kicking on that one. However, you're playing the Packers. You need to score touchdowns to win this game. I think they understood that. I think in the end, I was in favor of going for that one. Same story with the 4th and goal from the 3 in the third quarter. Packers had wrested control of the game back. They'd taken a lead. You needed touchdowns in those situations, I think, to win this game. And the final score showed that they absolutely needed those touchdowns to win. So I was in favor of those ones. The one at midfield was a similar story. Momentum was swinging away from you. You needed to keep the drive going. And the Packers were gifting you a sneak on that one, so I had no issue with that one. Those first 3, I think, were pretty routine things the Lions do.
Yeah, the one that they don't get is the one that I don't like strictly because of the situation and field position in which it happens. You're on, what is it, your own 30 or own 32 or something?
Yeah, 31-yard line.
And you have a lead at that point.
Yeah.
So there's really, if it was 4th and inches, sneak it. It was 4th and a yard and a half, and they run a weird toss on it. Never gonna work. We've discussed at length how we hate tosses on or long developing runs on fourth downs, because it just gives the defense too much of an opportunity to do what they did, which is shoot to the backfield, get the guy down, and in that situation, the Packers then take over at the 30-yard line. They're already in field goal range. They make quick work, and now they have a lead. And so, don't like that.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is the game state. Those two they go for on a previous drive, you're trailing in the game. Packers have just added 2 touchdowns in a row. Things are sliding away from you. This one, things are back in your favor. You scored a touchdown on the prior drive. You get a stop. You got the ball with the lead. And I think it's just so tempting. And there's a couple important things to note about this one. First of all, the play on third down is a pass to Tim Patrick. They get a really bad spot on that. It wasn't a first down, but it was a very important difference in where that ball was spotted. And I thought it was pretty clear as day watching live that it was a bad spot, that he should have been really close to the sticks. They mark him a full yard back, and in that kind of short yardage, 4th and 1-ish is very different than 4th and 6 inches. Because 4th and 6 inches, you don't really have to get that much. Honestly, the quarterback can just kind of leap over the pile if he wanted to and reach the ball across. 4th and 1's very different. And so that's number one is an issue there. Number two, they go up to the line, and I think they want to sneak it. That seems to be what they preferred to do. The Packers, in these short yardage ones, outside of the sneak that they get, every time are showing up with 4 defensive tackles in the AB gaps, just right there for their sneak deterrent formation. So the Lions get up to the line. They see that front. They're like, uh-oh, we're not going to sneak this here. We have to do something else. At that point, you should take the delay game and punt it. That's my take, is you get up to the line, see what they're showing you. If they're gifting you a sneak, as they did on a prior one that I mentioned, take advantage of it. But they're not gifting it to you. Just take the delay of game and punt. I think they got a little greedy there. That said, the play that they run, I don't know if that's inherently a bad play. What it looks like to me is I don't know if they've repped the play that they ran very much, because it really didn't seem like the players knew what they were supposed to be doing. You have Penei Sewell goes upfield. He's supposed to take a linebacker. He whiffs on the linebacker. That's not good. But you've got tight ends running in motion with Amon-Ra to the right side of the field, and I think they're supposed to run off tackle of Sewell in between him and the wide receivers. But the wide receivers run out wide, and the Packers defenders dip inside of them. And you watch that play again. Wright and Amon-Ra both are like, okay, here we are, we're running. Wait a second, those guys ran inside of us, and now they just tackled Gibbs. They don't end up blocking anyone. They looked honestly confused at who their assignments were. It just looked like a play that they didn't have a good mastery of. And so I just wonder how much they'd actually repped that play, because it looked totally disjointed. It may have worked if the guys knew their assignments, but no one seemed to know their assignment, which was something you don't see from this team very much.
Yeah, so, I don't think we're going to see the Lions go for it in that situation again, I think, for at least a while. We'll see what happens in the playoffs, but the one at the end of the game, which, look, you get it, Goff almost trips, but you get it, and you're able to drain the rest of the time and kick a field goal. Packers don't get the ball back. I had said going into that drive, tweeted out, if the Packers get the ball back in this game, they are going to win. You cannot give them the ball back. So I agree with going for it there. The talking heads at ESPN or on Twitter, whatever, absolutely despised that last fourth down call, because I think it was Emmanuel Acho. Is that how you pronounce that name?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
He called it asinine because the 4 yards wasn't going to make a difference. Was not the point of the fourth down, first of all. Then there was some guy on ESPN that was talking about, do you really have to go for it every time? Every time? Yes, you do. That's the identity of this team. Has no one been watching Detroit for the last 4 years?
Yeah, I think I have a few thoughts on this. First of all, I'm in favor of you on going for it here. I felt coming into this drive, like you mentioned, and I think this was Campbell's mindset, is the offense has to win the game. We are not giving the football back. It's burn the ships. This is it. This is our drive to win the game. We got to do it. And so I think from that mindset, it's the right call. I think my perspective on fourth downs was definitely shaped by watching the Stafford era, seeing these like high scoring, crazy comeback games where it just kind of felt like whoever had the ball last usually won the game. And if it was us, it was good because Stafford could drive down and win the game for us. If it was the other team, our defense wasn't stopping them most years. So that definitely shaped my thinking on fourth downs. But certainly in this game, it's where you have to apply the human element to the game and understanding that your defense is banged up, the other team has a good offense. You are, driving in plus territory. You had to run the clock out on that drive, and I'm glad that they did. I thought it was a no-brainer. It goes to their identity and everything they've been about. But my broader thought on this is I don't really know why along the way the fourth down aggression got coded as the like nerd thing to do. I know obviously it came from the analytics revolution, but the funniest thing about it is that like throwing in the white towel and just punting and playing field position is actually extremely wussy or whatever you want to call it. It's actually extremely lame. That the idea that going for these fourth down and shorts, the idea that we are the team that is going to come out and look you in the face and say, if it's our team and your team and we got to get 1 yard, we will smash your fucking face in and pick up the first down, is the most football thing ever. Like the most football guy meathead thing. And somehow it got coded that like sending the punter out there to play it safe is somehow the correct football man thing to do.
Yeah, it's
No,
the
it is.
normal thing.
Yeah, it's actually being aggressive in short yardage and believing we're just going to be a more physical and stronger team than you is the most football culture thing. And Dan Campbell exemplifies that. And so this one you had to go for it in my opinion. It's a half yard. Everything about
Yeah.
this team's identity is that we are going to get that first down on you if it's 1 yard and there's nothing you can do about it. And beautiful play call. You get a front side double with Zeitler and Sewell. You get Zylstra and Laporta with a double. Just opens right up, and Montgomery surges forward for the first down. Was a heart stopper with the Goff trip, falling down, handing the ball off. I know that there are certainly a subset of people watching this game that are college football fans that know that in college football that would have been a turnover on downs because if your knee is down at any point, you're just down. You don't have to be touched. Not relevant here, so we get away with it. But definitely, if you didn't have that in your mind, you would have freaked out just a little bit in that moment.
Yeah, so look, the Lions' entire offense has been built around these giant offensive linemen that do one thing, and that is push the opposing defensive line off the ball to be able to run the ball. It's fourth down. You want to smash your opponent's face in. It's the old, I think it was Saban quote: "Boxing has weight classes for a reason. You always want to be the biggest guy." And the Lions have invested in these mammoths on offense. This is what you get that for. So, very funny to see that part of the discourse after the game. The other part of the discourse after the game, I have to retract some statements I made because I have been on record saying, I don't know if it was on this show, but I've been on record saying that I actually like Packers fans. I don't like the Packers, but Packers fans are generally pretty enjoyable to interact with. And that is still true for most of them. I have to say that. But Thursday night and the subsequent Friday after proved that there are still bad apples in every fan base because Packers fans lost their minds after this game, claiming that the refs completely fixed this game in favor of the Lions, that the Packers had been completely screwed over. Even if that were true, which I don't believe it is, justice. That is karma. That is what happens after however many years of us claiming that. And the Packers fans just say, well, how about you just get better so that the refs aren't an issue? We got better. Deal with it.
Yeah, it definitely brought back memories of a certain game at Lambeau Field 5 years ago. That was a far worse injustice, but it is what it is. Look, I didn't think that this was a poorly refereed game. Like in the whole, there was stuff they missed, but
I think the refs were bad, but they're just bad for both teams, right? Like it's not like they were
yeah,
bad
like
in
yeah,
one direction.
I didn't come away like they came away from this talking like this was the Saints Rams NFC title game, and we watched like the worst thing to ever happen unfold, or like it's the Lakers Sacramento Kings game 7 from 2002, where we just watch a heist happen in the hands of the Zebras. That is not what I watched. There were some things they missed. There are things they always miss. And honestly, the biggest thing for me about this game is that when you are discussing ref talk, I think for me, you need to focus on the like big incident that happens. That basically, if you come out and want to do ref talk, but your ref talk is 12 items long, you're just a whiner. Like, honestly, that's the truth. And I know people that are like this. I know people in my own fan bases that are like this. Focus on the one big thing, right? Like, the game I referenced, the Lambeau Field incident, we all talk about the Trey Flowers hands to the face. That's what gets remembered. Or the Rams Saints one, it's the pass interference. Focus on the big thing. If you can find one huge call that definitively swung the game, I'm willing to listen. But if you come out and you're like, oh, look at these 15 things, including these 5 plays where holding wasn't called. It's like, there's missed calls on holding on every play. Like, just shut up. That's going to happen. That's part of football. Like, let's focus on the important thing that happened in this game. And so if they had just staked their entire claim on the Watson OPI, which is something to discuss in and of itself, it's one thing. But they were talking about the, like, bizarre stuff. Like, I saw a couple threads where they were talking about the illegal contact on Tim Patrick on the first drive for the Lions. They're like, this is a phantom illegal contact. I watched the play. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, what are you talking about? He gets clearly grabbed, and it impedes his ability to get to the ball. Like, I don't even know what that's referring to. And then they get into, as I mentioned, like several holdings that weren't called. Okay, there's missed holdings all the time. They get into wanting a block in the back on Penei Sewell on a pass rush set where he's, guiding the edge rusher wide of the quarterback. That's never a block in the back ever in the history of the football. That has never been flagged. And it finished up with them talking about the Goff knee on the Montgomery play where they were getting out the rule book. They got the rule book out to try and claim that Goff's knee being down is the same as a QB kneel. No, it's not. Like, I don't know if these were like bots that got onto social media and are using the rulebook because they've never seen an NFL game, but just some mystifying claims because those things have never been called that way in history. That it was extremely obnoxious and very confusing, but it also exposed a severe lack of ball knowledge, and in that I can take some satisfaction.
Yeah. So the big claims were that aforementioned knee, which, by the way, I don't think any Packers fan has realized that intent matters in the NFL.
Yes.
The offensive pass interference. I understand if there's a Packers fan that says, how are you going to call that but not call the Lions on their subsequent drive where there was a similar looking play? Matt LaFleur lost his mind at that. Yeah. I can somewhat understand that. I understand. Like, look, if you want to make your argument around that the Lions should have been dinged for offensive pass interference, okay, I'll hear you out. It wouldn't have changed anything because we saw what happened on 2nd and 17, which is another thing that they complained about, that Amon-Ra St. Brown should have been called for offensive pass interference for pushing off on his route. And to that I say, go watch any wide receiver in the NFL. Wide receivers are taught this is to create separation. you run and you sort of lean into the DB, and then at the apex of your route you break off. The DB is going to be leaning up because you're putting your body weight on them, and then you break off and they're going to be off balance for half a second. Gives you separation. That's how you run routes in the NFL. Go watch Javonte Adams. Go watch Cooper Kupp. Go watch Justin
Yeah.
Jefferson. Go watch anyone. That is how good wide receivers run their routes. So,
Yeah, and I mean, you can slow that one down and notice that the DB there was already off balance before the contact happens. Like he's already on his heels before Amon-Ra, leans into him a bit. Not blatant enough. That never gets called. Not that's not going to happen. The on the OPI topic, the one they don't call on the Lions, which is on Laporta, he like creates a little some contact. Honestly, the reason that wasn't called and the one on Watson is the one on the Lions went for 3 yards out of bounds. Like that's the biggest reason. The Lions really gained very little off that play. The other one went for a touchdown, and that the more important the play is, the more the more impactful it is, the more likely it's going to get called, just speaking frankly. But as you mentioned, they get kind of a makeup call. I mean, it was a holding, but it was fairly ticky-tack. Like, it wasn't blatant, didn't lead to a huge gain. They hit on Ragnow, then the Lions pick it up anyway. Like, whatever, not that important to me. The one they did genuinely miss was the hit on Love from Zadarius Smith, which, let's be frank here, was not a malicious hit. Like, Zadarius didn't wind up trying to take his head off or something. He didn't launch himself headfirst into the quarterback. He's trying to finish the play off. His hand kind of gets up there, bonk, hits Love in the head. Accidental. Should have been called, whatever. They don't, so that's a bummer. But again, it's a general expectation to be an NFL fan. You have to understand that there will be at least one or two things every week that don't go your way, just kind of how it goes. Hopefully it's not highly consequential, and this one was early in the game, so I can't say it really was. As for the Watson OPI thing, my final statement on this topic, because I went back and I watched this play many, many times. The rulebook says it has to be outside the 1 yard of the line of scrimmage. He had, I believe, up until the 5 yard line. They were at the 6. And Dan Orlovsky breaks this play down and tries to kind of chart a middle path where he's being indecisive and doesn't really want to say what he actually thinks about this. And he's going in this and he's like, well, you see, the contact, he's doing his Tony Romo impression, watching replays, oh, I don't know about that. Oh, it's on the 4.75, maybe the 4 point. No, not relevant. You have 1 yard. Like, this is, in a rule book, there has to be rules. There have to be black and whites. 1 yard, 5 yard line, or beyond. That's it. Doesn't matter if it's on the 4.99 yard line. It's past 1 yard. That's the way it is. Sorry, you don't get a gray area. You don't get extra space. There have to be rules. So it is outside the legal contact area. And the second thing here is the way that they have policed this rule. It has increasingly become on the wide receiver to avoid the contact with the DB if you were going to be trying to do a rub route or a pick play, or at least to make it as least obvious as possible. This was extremely obvious because he knocks Kirby Joseph down to the ground, completely eliminates him from the play. When I saw it the first time, I kind of thought he was like almost shoulder checking the guy, like boom, kind of a leap into him. Packers fans are claiming that he was trying to sidestep Joseph and try to like change his body to get himself thin to go around him. I don't really see it, but I'm willing to grant that as an interpretation. Problem is, whether he's trying to or not, he doesn't. Whether he's trying to avoid contact or not, he knocks Kirby Joseph over. And again, it's more on the wide receiver. And my final part about this is when you watch the play, Kirby Joseph's eyes are on Jacobs and are on Jordan Love. He's shuffling that direction, but he's watching those guys. His head is not up. If he sees Watson coming, it's purely in the peripheral vision. Watson, on the other hand, head is turned. He's looking at Kirby the entire way. I think if both guys are looking at each other and they run into each other, you can claim, incidental contact. But one guy isn't looking at it. One guy is looking at the receiver he's supposed to cover, and then he gets knocked over. At that point, given that it leads to a touchdown, you have to call it. Like it just that's the way it is. If you want to not get called for OPI, don't run over the defender. Like, sorry, I don't really know what to say.
And look, by the same token that we say the Goffney intention matters, when it comes to these rules, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
Like it's and the nuance of the rule book is something that people have delved into at nauseum. But like at the end of the day, you knock a player over, it impacts the play. And the funny thing is, if this pass gets thrown like 3 seconds later, or if it's thrown to the other side of the field, who cares, right? Like, because it doesn't impact the play. It directly impacts the
yeah,
play, and that's why it gets called. And that's like, it's a consequential moment. Obviously, that's why it's going to get highlighted so much. But I don't know, man. Like it is what it is. The refs are always going to be bad. Like today, we have Chargers fans complaining about the fact that the Chiefs got away with a bunch of holdings on the final drive. Happens. Like
yeah. That is just the way it tends to go. I don't know. The funniest thing about OPI is in my final statement on it. They For many years the NFL twisted the rule book and bent it over to help offense gain yards and gain points. And defensive coaches just had to sit back and take it and adjust their approaches. Now, all of a sudden, over the last year or two, they've decided to, hit the NFL has changed and are hitting back on this one item, this one particular play. They haven't fixed the DPI problems I always complain about. It's this one thing. And yet, every single week, every time it's called, we have to deal with these offensive pretty boy coaches like LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay, et cetera, just cry crocodile tears to the referee. No, sir, please don't take my favorite play. No, no. And it's just pathetic. Like, come on, man. It's one thing that goes against you. You still have a million other tools to gain yards against defenses. Sorry, they're legislating this one thing out of the game because it was involving defensive players getting run over by offensive players. Like,
to
no
to be
sympathy
fair,
for you.
Ben Johnson is probably also part of that crowd. Like he
Oh yeah,
probably, like he
well we will
definitely,
get to see it.
yeah. Now to close out the ref talk, to quote one of the worst coaches in Detroit Lions history, Matt Patricia, if you have a problem with a call impacting a game, don't put yourself in a position where a call could impact the game. The one thing he was actually right about,
Hey, I
like,
mean, Matt Patricia said it himself last week. He's the reason why Dan Campbell's successful. Got to listen to his advice.
I watched part of that segment where he's just going on. He's like, I love how Dan Campbell's coaching these guys. They play so hard. The culture is so good. And I can tell that on the inside, he's just so desperately wanting to say, I was going to be able to build that if I stayed there. So, with that being said, do you have any last thoughts on this game?
No, not really. I hate the Packers. I'm proud to say it. And, you know, two in a row, 6 out of 7. Let it roll.
Yeah, I'll probably title this episode FTP Forever just because that encapsulates how Lions fans feel. So, moving on from this game, this chaotic game, um, quickly around the rest of the league, there wasn't as much of
No,
there was a,
boring kind of week, honestly. A lot of teams on buys. So,
yeah. So, yeah. By the way, week 14 buys. Get out of here. The Lions bye was 9 weeks ago. Okay, I hate that. Like that's such an injustice to all the teams that had a week 5 bye that they have to sit back while 6 teams or something go on bye this past week.
yeah.
Unbelievable. So first of all, the Vikings. We have been just begging anyone to play a good game against the Vikings. Kirk Cousins is playing some of his worst football in his career right now. That did not change whatsoever. The Vikings, once again, win a game, and I hate it because, yeah, there's no such thing as justice in the NFL because the Vikings are now 11-2.
Hey, Sam Darnold played a great game in this one. Got to give him a lot of credit.
Yep.
Falcons are cooked, man. Like they
Yeah.
are toast. It looks like. Relevant to the next game, we'll probably talk about. I think unequivocally at this point in time, the Carolina Panthers are a better football team than the Atlanta Falcons. Like the Atlanta Falcons are just look like ass. Just put it frankly. They gained 496 yards in this game, but they turn it over all the time, and they're making constant dumb errors in this game. There's a defensive holding on a field goal, which I've never seen in my life before that.
Just off that, you deserve to lose the game. How are you going to take a defensive holding on a field goal? Dude, what is there to hold? Just run forward and hit the guy.
And much to our amusement, they kicked 2 field goals under 30 yards in distance after the Cardinals did that exact thing last week and lost against the Vikings. They also, I think, don't the Falcons punt on like 4th and 2 from midfield, like in the middle of this game at one point? Like it just, you can never take Dan Campbell for granted when you watch an afternoon of Red Zone because it's just like stunning the things you see in these other games.
The Cardinals and Falcons have outed themselves as some of the most cowardly coaching staffs in the entire league over the past few weeks. Arizona was guilty of a number of those same kind of plays again against Seattle. But yeah, the Vikings, I mean, good credit to them. Like they keep winning games that I like. You gotta be good to win this many games. So
hey,
and actually
for the first time ever, when it comes to week whatever that is 17, when the Packers play the Vikings,
yeah,
let's go Packers.
Yeah,
we are Packers fans now for that one.
We are also the biggest Seahawks fans for the next few weeks because Seattle has Green Bay and Minnesota on the schedule coming up. Please. I care more about the Vikings one than the Packers one at this point because Green Bay's not winning the division.
No, they're basically eliminated.
Yeah. So now I saw this stat this morning. The Packers, Lions, and Vikings are a combined 28-3 against the NFL this year. If you don't count games against each other, they have not lost since October. They have only lost to each other, and the Lions haven't, but the Vikings and Packers have only lost to either the Lions or the Vikings if you're the Packers, because yeah, it's insane how good these 3 teams have been against the rest of the NFL. Kind of comical that the Lions they win the division once, and then everyone decides to go Super Saiyan and become a super team, except for the Bears because lol Bears.
Hey, I want to say that, that was not very kind to the Falcons fans. We were just dunking on them, and then you had to bring up 28-3, just like that. So, not very kind. On the Bears topic, very quickly, the yardage in the halftime of that game against the Niners was an all-time box score. They were being outgained 320-4 at halftime. They did rebound a little bit in the second half, but still got the brakes beat off of them. Only thing to say about that one, the return of the Lions hangover. It's back.
And credit to the Niners for at least looking like themselves for 1 week. Like,
hey, that game this Thursday against the Rams is now very intriguing after those 2 teams had a very nice week. The other score I think that's really relevant to mention is the Eagles-Panthers one. That was an interesting game, and I didn't expect it to be.
So, first note on that. First of all, I feel so bad for Jonathan Brooks, rookie running back for the Panthers, drafted in the 2nd round. I think we talked a few weeks ago about the kind of funny management of assets where you draft a 2nd round running back and then you extend Chuba Hubbard for 4 years. I mean, cool, whatever. But Jonathan Brooks, he has a lengthy rehab from an ACL injury. He comes back, he plays, I think 2 games, and it was just confirmed that he retore his ACL. Just horrible. Feel terrible for him. Now, the team around him They have turned into quite a scrappy team, the Panthers. Bryce Young, ever since coming back from being benched, has looked really good, honestly. Like, he's made some great throws. They are suddenly like super elite at converting like clutch fourth downs at the end of the game. Like, the Panthers, I for my money, this is a very niche, but for my money, are the best team in the league at losing by one score.
Yeah, no, the Panthers masterful tank season, right? Like this is whatever sport we're talking about. This is what you want a tank season to be, one in which you are feisty and competitive and some important players for your future are starting to look promising, but you lose all the games, so you still get the high draft pick. They are doing that. They played well. Like this was not a fraudulent game where they get a bunch of turnovers and hang in there. Yardage is basically even in this game. Eagles run fewer plays, so they outgain them on a yards per play basis. But overall, really tight game. Panthers are driving late, and they have an opportunity to potentially go ahead. Young throws a good ball to Xavier Legette, laying out for it. If he holds on, it's a touchdown because he was untouched rolling into the end zone. Instead, he does not hold on. He had, what, 2 or 3 drops on those final few series there. I don't know much about Legette, honestly. I didn't see him play in college very much. I haven't watched the Panthers a lot, but just from one afternoon, I'm convinced he's the worst receiver in the NFL because that was a brutal showing.
Yeah, look, if you're Carolina, you have one item on the agenda for the offseason. That is get Bryce Young help in any and all forms. And I think the primary way is through getting a true number one wide receiver just to kind of help him out and give him a safety blanket out there. Offensive line, obviously, it will need to be improved as well. But yeah, Legette's, I mean, maybe he'll develop, but looking very Quinton Johnston like right now, which like rookie Johnston, I should
Yeah,
say, with the stone hands. Aside
not
from
a
that, oh yeah,
not a good game from them. But Eagles looked a little more vulnerable this week. Big game against the Steelers. That is in Philadelphia, but it's the Battle of the Keystone State or Commonwealth, I believe is what they call their state. But then they play Washington the week after. So these are the 2 weeks to get a game from them, which I do still think is going to happen just because it's really hard to go 15-2 and win as many games as they're going to have to win to pull that off. But hey, you never know. Lions, I believe, now do have the tiebreak over Philadelphia. My understanding is if the Lions just win out, or they can drop one game, right? They can lose to the Bills and then win the other 3 and get the number 1 seed. If the Eagles lose another one, then you could only have to win 2. So cheering for that outcome. We'll see if it happens.
Mhm.
But, ball's in the Lions' court. Beyond the Eagles game, I do want to mention the divisional races elsewhere in the NFC. Buccaneers win again with the Falcons in free fall. I think Bucs are clearly in the driver's seat to win that division now. I generally felt it was the Falcons to lose because they had the tiebreak, but they lost it. So now it's in the Bucs' court.
So weird, man. I don't know how the Falcons looked so good against the Bucks, but so bad against everyone else.
Yeah, I don't know. So Tampa Bay, they look like the drivers. And then out west, we have a bit of a shakeup here in the last few weeks. Seattle pulls off the 3-week sweep of the Cardinals, beating them in Arizona this weekend, 30-18. I didn't see a lot of that game, but big win for the Seahawks. And now they're pretty clearly in the driver's seat in the NFC West. They've played almost all of their divisional games. They have one final game against the Rams, but next 3 weeks they do a full tour of the NFC North outside of the Lions. They go Packers, Vikings, Bears, 3 in a row here to close out the final stretch run. As long as they bank a win or 2 in that period, I think they probably have this division. Cardinals look like they're in big trouble now. Maybe the Rams are the biggest competitor to the Seahawks at this point. So that whole division is just kind of turning over week after week, and it's a little unpredictable. But now the picture is becoming a little clearer.
Yeah, and I think Seattle has the tiebreaker over San Fran in case the Niners go on a run and the Seahawks drop a couple of these games. So
Yes, I think
barring
Seahawks.
barring outcomes, but
Yeah, Seahawks are 3-2 at the moment. Niners are 1-3 in the division. So
Yeah, so would have to
probably.
have yeah. I think like look, the Niners path is very difficult right now. They basically need to win out. They have to have their division mates lose a game or two, or they need the Commanders to really stink it up down the stretch, which we'll see. I mean, they were on bye this week, so we'll see what happens there. Yeah, Rams did look. The offense looked solid against the Bills. Defense, but I think Josh Allen had 6 total touchdowns.
Yeah, the Rams are a funny team because they're not that great. Like they have some major issues. They've had some injuries. The talent overall isn't that great. They've been outgained overall on the season, but the top line talent is still so good that when you watch them play a game like the Bills game, it's certainly possible. Like, look, if they were to wrestle this division away from the Seahawks and squeak into the playoffs, and then they host Packers or Vikings in a wild card game or something like that, I'd be concerned if I'm Packers or Vikings. Like, not that I can't win, but you just watch this game against the Bills, and it's like, man, if Stafford is on and Puka is, doing his thing, and Kyron Williams, like they just have the ability to be like, we're just gonna ball, and you can't do anything about it. And Stafford, yesterday, 23 of 30 for 320, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. When that's going on, we remember that game against the Lions to start the season. He was really good, and he's just moving around the pocket and slinging dimes and bizarre arm angles and spots your DBs can't do anything about. It's frightening. I wouldn't I wouldn't really want to see them in the playoffs necessarily if I'm a wild card team.
When Puka and Cooper Cup are both on the field, Stafford has been lethal this season. Like, it's just absolutely incredible. Puka had a fantastic game against the Bills, much to my chagrin because I was playing against him in fantasy. But yes, like as long as those two receivers are there, Stafford is going to be able to get it to them, and McVay is gonna scheme up some fun stuff. So it's gonna just be they're gonna be a tough out. It's much like how we talked about the Chargers a few weeks ago about how they're going to upset someone in the playoffs just because of how
Yep.
well coached they are. The Rams are the NFC equivalent to that.
Yeah, I mean the Bucks are also looking, dangerous. Their defense isn't great, but their offense is really good too. And so I think if you are those wild card potential teams, you would have really preferred the scenario a few weeks ago of Cardinals, Falcons winning those divisions instead of Tampa Bay and Rams because they just have that talent that can be genuinely very dangerous. And it was dangerous yesterday for our upcoming opponent, the Buffalo Bills.
And yeah, so this is the game on the schedule. I referred to the Texans game back in week not 10, I think it was. I referred to that as a side quest. That was an optional side quest. You didn't need to win that. In retrospect, you did need to win that because no one in the NFC is losing ever again, apparently. And this game, though, this is a side quest. You do not
Yep.
need to win this game. You can lose this game and be perfectly fine. This is, to me, this is your litmus test, right? This is one of the AFC elite. Let's see how you stack up to the other conference's best teams, right? Let's see how you stack up playing against a true MVP candidate in Josh Allen. Like let's see how this goes. Well, I don't know who the Lions are going to get back. You hope you get at least Ali McNeil, DJ Reader back. I don't think Pascal or Onwuzurike are going to be healthy enough. Decker, same thing. You hope, but is what it is. The mini buy, I hope, just helped some of those guys that were day to day get back on track. Emmanuel Mosley, at the very least, should be back. So
Yeah,
we'll
I mean
see.
they get the long layoff, which hopefully heals some guys up. What I do know, or I guess, is that if there are guys on the fence going into this game, they'll probably sit them just for sake of caution, given the situation here, and it's not essential they can afford to lose it due to tiebreaker math and still control their own destiny for both the division and the number one seed. But obviously, you'd like to win it. Obviously, you are the home team, so hopefully that builds in a little bit of an advantage, and it should be a really good game. I mean, the Bills are a really good team. They didn't have their best game yesterday, but their performance this season has certainly been impressive. James Cook pretty good running back. Josh Allen, as we know, one of the best there is in the game. Khalil Shakir's had a nice season. Keon Coleman's a dangerous, contested catch jump ball kind of guy. Dalton Kincaid is solid tight end. Their defense this year generally has been pretty solid, although it got ripped up in that game yesterday by the Rams. But I expect this to be a pretty high-scoring game just because these offenses are good. It'll be indoors, don't have the weather to worry about. We'll see if the Lions can gut it out, but a little bit less stressful of a day just because, you don't have to win it, and that's nice at least.
Yeah, given I think this will be a week where, like, if I had to guess, I think we're gonna walk into or like the show next week and be like, "Yep, the Lions and Vikings have the same amount of wins now." Cause I mean, Minnesota plays Chicago, Detroit has the Bills, who like this could be a potential Super Bowl preview, right?
Yep.
Like, so this is gonna be obviously a tough game. There'll be a lot of eyes on it. I think it's in the 4 o'clock window, I believe.
Yep, it's going up against the Steelers-Eagles game, so the
There you go.
people that are the neutrals can just sit on red zone and feast all afternoon for the 4 o'clock window.
Yeah, and I always have beef with Red Zone or with the NFL scheduling for having Red Zone deal with 8 morning games and 3 afternoon games, but when the games are good, it's less of a problem, right? So
Man,
it's going to be
there's also Tampa Bay Chargers going on in that window as well that I just looked at. So
it's interesting. Yeah,
that's quite a 4 o'clock window.
yeah. So it'll be an exciting game. If you're a Lions fan, I would recommend just sit back and enjoy this one. Don't stress too much because regardless of what happens, the Lions control their own destiny going up into the final 3-week stretch here. So just enjoy it, man.
Yeah,
Um,
that's we savor the Packers game and see what happens in this one.
yeah. With that being said, Alex, do you have any concluding thoughts?
No, not really. This was a longer episode than some, but there was a lot to talk about. The stretch run of the season, very eventful. So, again, they're 4-0 in the division. It's hard to believe they are at 12-1. Just given how hard it is to go 12-1. Jared Goff was on a team that started 11-1 years ago with the Rams, the year they went to Super Bowl. Even they didn't go 12-1. They lost their 13th game that season. So this is a pretty special thing, and we should definitely appreciate it.
Should mention, I guess, that we forgot to mention this, but the Lions, with the Packers win, their official longest win streak in franchise history at 11 games. Obviously, the 12-1 start is their best start in franchise history. It's a lot of good going on in Detroit right now. So hopefully they keep it up. Not the end of the world if they don't, but as long as they you want it to be a competitive game. You don't want a Raven situation here because that would definitely be a blow to the confidence. But with that being said, that is going to be it for this episode. You can follow the show on any podcasting platform or subscribe on YouTube. And if you've made it this far, you can find us on Twitter. The show is at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. And we'll see you guys next week with another recap of, well, hopefully a more entertaining weekend of football. Cheers, everyone.